that I would say that some of the previous chiefs I'd worked for, they always had to feel like they were the smartest in the room, you know? And that's just like, I know I'm not the smartest in the room. Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Oregon. Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, episode number 27. It's kind of cool because I'm here with Alec, and he is the host of the Chief Exchange podcast. Works with Ready Rebound. And if you're not using it, LinkedIn, such a good source. That's where Alec and I actually connected at probably about a year or so ago, and learned all about what Alec's doing. And this guy is, really a game changer for the first responder world. And it really comes with, as we all know, in our world, we have a lot of injuries in the police and fire departments and any first responder. And Ready Rebound is really just trying to help get them back to work a little bit quicker. Really happy to be here. This episode is actually going to be simultaneously recorded with the Chief Exchange podcast. So I wanted to bring it to the audience of the Triple P so they could experience me being the interviewee instead of the interviewer, which is going to be unique, but will also be a fun experience. So welcome, Alec Wands, to the Triple P podcast.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be able to have this episode get out to your audience. So I appreciate the work you do, and I'm excited we're doing this. All right, Chief Nation, we have Chief Clayton O'Brien from Oregon Fire and Rescue in Ohio, not the state of Oregon. And he's also the host of Triple P Podcast, which stands for Premier, Professional, and Proactive. If you haven't listened, be sure to check him out on LinkedIn. That is where we met about a year ago. So I've known Chief O'Brien for a little bit. And Chief, this is one of the first questions I always ask because it takes a special breed to be a firefighter. Is what made you want to run towards a career in the fire service, as most people like to run away from fires?
You know, quite honestly, it's a family tradition for me. So my dad was a firefighter. Started out, he's a volunteer fireman. And back in the day, I didn't even know that you could do this as a full-time career. But just seeing the camaraderie and the relationships that my dad built at the fire department, such close friends. And unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 14 years old. I was, he actually was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 35, died at 37. But during that short period of time when he experienced cancer is when the whole fire family came together. And I knew at that point that, the impact that he had on our local community, the people that he knew in such a short period of time, and the well connection of just being out there helping people, I knew that was something that I definitely wanted to do. Never knew I wanted to do it full time. Never knew there was even a possibility, quite honestly. It started out where I thought I was going to be a contractor. I did construction. I framed houses, did concrete, did walls, and actually did flat work to put myself through paramedic school. But yeah, then once I realized that this is actually a career, it was, then it felt like I've never worked since then.
That's awesome. They say once you find what you love doing, you never work a day in your life. So I'm happy that you love what you wake up and do each day, because not many people do that. And I know he mentioned your Triple P podcast before. Do you kind of mind explaining what that's about? How did that start?
Sure. So the Triple P podcast, actually the name is always kind of weird when what's that stand for? And it's a Premier, Professional, Proactive, which is the essentially those core values that come from the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. In the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association has multiple committees, and one of those committees is the Education Committee. And so I remember we were sitting in an education committee down in Columbus one day, and it was talked about, trying to just reconnect with the younger generation. Podcasts are a thing. People are driving all the time, a lot more, and being able to, connect with them at their space. And so they could turn it on and listen and whatever. So that's when it really kind of started, was the education committee. I was hesitant at first. I really was. And I was hesitant because one is I'm not super tech savvy, but my assistant chief at the time was very tech savvy. So I was going to rely heavily on him at least to help get us started. And then also having the equipment. I knew that if you're going to do a podcast, you got to have high quality sound, and you got to have, when you first put it out, just like I tell young firefighters all the time, is that from day one, you begin establishing your reputation, and you got about 2 years to establish what your reputation is going to last you for quite some time. So I knew that how this podcast was going to come out was going to be those first few episodes is going to be a make or break type of thing. So I went back to our local church. We had a good relationships with our local church. They did a podcast for their church. And I talked to Ben and I said, he worked us through, let us use his equipment, set us all up. So we went through the scheduling. We did a first few episodes there. And then it kind of got to the point where, now we're overextending our stay. It's either we're either gonna do it or we're not going to. And if we're gonna invest into it from the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association, we had to truly invest into it. And so after they heard a few of those episodes, Joel did a lot of the editing. He was able to get, all the music and introductions and things and got all that down. And the Ohio Fire Chiefs really bought into it. And that's how they purchased all the equipment that you're seeing here. So we wanted to go with, I asked Ben, I said, hey, if you were to do a podcast right now today, like what equipment would you buy? And so he led us to where, what equipment it should be. And it allows us to be mobile. So I take it, with us to the conference and we do round tables and can, go and travel wherever. So we're using that Rodecaster Pro, makes it very easy.
That's awesome. Like if you're going to do something, you might as well do it right. And you don't want your name attached to something bad. And I kind of I know you said that before when we were talking, but it's like, yeah, if you're going to do something, do it right. So I'm glad that you're leading by example here. And as fire chief, you're obviously a leader of a department. In your mind, what do you feel defines a good leader?
So, well, I think what it starts off with being a good leader is just caring for your people. We have many different people that work in the organization today, but I think it first and foremost starts with caring. Don't forget where you came from. I actually became a chief when at a pretty young age, in a department that I worked for. I didn't work for the greatest chiefs in the past. And so I would say that you learn the most from maybe working for the ones that aren't the best. And so I took away a lot of things of what not to do. And one of those things was that just care for your people. And if your people understand that you care, then it's a completely different game changer. We're all on the same page. We're all working towards the same mission. And so I think that I just try to focus on that. I try to focus on just, caring for my people and understanding that there's different phases in the fire department. And I kind of explain it like, the first year of the first year in the firehouse to probably 3 years is, or 1 to 2 years is, you're the biggest sponge. You want to learn everything. You're willing to learn everything. You have a good attitude. And then that's phase number 1. So you're the sponge. And then phase number 2 would be between like 2 and 5 years. And I would say that phase is God's gift to firefighting. You know it all. Nobody can tell you anything. Like you are the God. You are the best. This is the paragods. This is like, until you hit that humbling event, because you got a little complacent. You lacked a little bit on training, and then you had that humbling event that says, "Oh my gosh." And that's about that 5-6 year mark. And then I would say that you turn into this mature firefighter, and that mature firefighter then begins to, really understand that this job is bigger than us and that we are here for a calling and things. And so when that happens, that's what I say, that as fire chief, we got to know what phase our firefighters are in and support them in ways of education and support them in ways of knowing that we all want to create memories in the firehouse. So there's going to be phases in that 1 to 3 years that you're going to have a lot of fun. And that you got to expect that those individuals are going to have a lot of fun, because you know what? At 15, 16 years on the job, they're going to want to have a story to tell the rookie that they did too. It's just the way it goes. Another part of a good leader, I think, is being passionate. Having passion is contagious. And if you're passionate about your job, then you're going to bleed this passion to all of your followers, essentially. Try to come in with, I have a sign that I look at right here by my window. It says, attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. And I put that, I've had it in every one of my offices, because that is one thing that we can't change. I cannot change your attitude. You control your attitude when you come into work every day. And I want to create an environment that is going to bring a positive attitude. I don't want you to wake up in the morning and, oh my gosh, I got to go to work today. Like, I don't want you to feel like that. I've had firefighters that felt like that. And I told them, I said, hey, did your phone ring this morning? He says, no, what do you mean? I said, did you have a missed call from me? No. And I said, well, so did you have a missed call from anybody here? He says, well, no, I didn't. What do you mean? What are you trying to get at? I said, if you didn't have a missed call from anybody, I said, last night you made a choice. You made a choice to set your alarm and get up and come to work today. So if you're coming to work miserable every single day, it's very simple. Don't set your alarm. I said, you didn't miss a call. You don't want to come, but why put yourself in this misery every single day? So we got to change the attitude. It's like me going over there and putting my finger in the light socket. I know that that's not going to feel good. So I'm not going to do it. So if you don't want to repeat and have that, then we got to figure out like what it is. You need a job. You have to pay the bills. Let's figure out what is at the root cause of, why you have a bad attitude. And so I think meeting them at that level, that kind of changed it from there. Like, boom, I have an epiphany. Like I can change, and I think that's, a big thing about it. So I try to express just being passionate about the job. It goes a long ways.
Like enthusiasm is infectious. Like it's like how, like you can make other people excited just by how you're acting. And just like you said before, it's like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
100%. That is 100%, because I think that, some of the ways that I would say that some of the previous chiefs I'd worked for, they always had to feel like they were the smartest in the room, and that's just like, I know I'm not the smartest in the room, but I know I'm bringing everybody that is the smartest in their fields into the room. That's all you got to do. You got to engage and have good conversations and bring out the best of everybody in the room and surround yourself by good people. And then just let them go to work and they will make you so proud. Just trust them, because the micromanagement thing does not work. They all have, these are careers that we're talking about. They've went to fire school. They went to paramedic school. They've done all these things that they're grown individuals. They raise families. They're controlling a house at home. So they don't need to come and be babysat all day, all the time. I'm not saying they don't need a dad at times, because they do. Because I do contribute being a chief, very similar to being a father at home. It's just like because you care, and that's what it is. That it's not always going to be. You're going to have some disciplines and things of that nature. You're going to have some constructive criticisms, and those things come along with it. But they understand that that conversation's harder for me to have than it is for them, and when they understand that that's the case and that I don't look forward to it, but it must happen, then they understand that we get to a better place if we have that conversation. Good for a fire chief is that being okay with, I would say, being like fluid or willing to pivot at times. It's not always going to be our way. Just because you're the chief of the department doesn't mean that it's got to be your way or the highway. Be okay with it, and be transparent with this. And I tell my people this all the time, is that, we may head in this direction, and we may head in this direction for a period of time. But if we realize that it's just not working, we'll change it. That's okay. We're doing that right now. I mean, when I got to Oregon in November of 22, I had been chief in Napoleon previously for the previous 7 years. And then I came to Oregon in November of 22. And shortly after, we had kind of changed some software things. And when we changed those software things, thought was going in the right direction. Now we're here today, a year and a half later, we're like, I don't know if that was great. It wasn't so great. So, and I'm out there saying, yep, maybe this wasn't the best move. So we are now looking to make another change. And yes, it happens. That's the way it goes. But I would say that you got to be okay with that. You got to be transparent too, that maybe it was me making too quick of a decision. But I'm okay with saying that, hey, if it's not working for the people, then we got to make a change. So be willing to be fluid or pivot, I think is a good way. Know your role as a fire chief. There's two works that happen in the firehouse, and that is, as a firefighter, you work in the organization. And as you work in the organization, I want you to provide good customer service, be the highest trained person, and have good little wins. All these EMS calls that we go on are all little wins that we win every single time by having this small little interaction on these calls that gain all this community support. learn and to get all those wins during that time, because then when the time does come and when we have a hiccup and we make a mistake, we're going to be transparent about it. We are all human. We all make mistakes, but our community won't just like drop and lose trust in us immediately. They will understand that mistakes happen. That's not Oregon Fire. You know, that's just not them. We've had interactions with them more than, 100 times, and it's never been like this. This one time, they're going to give you a little forgiveness. So they work in the organization. I want them focused on all those emergency calls, training, all that stuff. Whereas in my position, I look at myself as I'm working on the organization. So I'm working on and for them. What kind of resources do they need to do their job successfully? What kind of resources do they need so they're safe and they can go home every day? What kind of resources and support do they need to be able to make sure that they're having a good attitude and going out there? Because the environment that we create inside this house is what, actually bleeds to the outside of the house. So if they're happy in the work environment, then they're going to be happy outside. And that's going to, cast a positive image for our department and then ultimately bleed a good reputation. So if we all know our role, that, I really embrace servant leadership, to a point where that's why I say just working on the organization, the vision. What are we working towards in 5 years, and constantly communicate and sound like a sales guy all the time and like a broken record. But that's what it takes, because communicating is probably one of the number one things. So.
Mm-hmm. I think you mentioned a really important thing there about you're working on the organization while you have your very skillful people working in the organization, and the power of delegation there is what matters. I think that's one of the best qualities of a leader. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You have a command staff of the smartest people around there to go do what you want. And yeah, you mentioned the software thing didn't work out a year and a half ago. It's not like you implemented the program thinking it wasn't going to work out now. You had the positive intent and you had work ethic towards it. And I think that's what should be the measurable, is what was my intent going in and how hard did I work to implement it so it's the best for my firefighters. We can't always control the outcome.
Very true. And, because you do get sold, right? And at the time, I feel like we got to give it a college try. And I was back and forth about it, like, well, is it on us? Are we not learning it? Does it have the capabilities, but we're just not able to, maximize those capabilities, things of that nature. So, yeah, I do agree. But ultimately that's me leaning on them and what that information comes back. And, here we are. Now we're changing.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of change too, like when there is new recruits coming into the fire service, like you talked about, they're the ones having fun. Then you have your seasoned professionals who are maybe 15 years in or towards retirement. How do you go about managing such a diverse group who are at very different stages of life?
Well, I will tell you, I actually really, really enjoy it. And I think the reason why I enjoy it so much is because, so uniquely enough, I'm 40 years old. I had my son when I was 17. So my wife and I are celebrating our 20th year wedding anniversary next week. We're going, it's actually the 22nd of this month. We're going on a cruise next week. So we've been together since I was 15 years old, and we've raised our family. All my entire fire career, all the education that I've got through this entire time has been built through us being all together and raising a young family. So with that being said, I feel like I'm very, I'm in the millennial piece. I was raised by a baby boomer, and then, but I have let's see, I have a Gen Z, I have two Gen Zs. And so I feel like that's how I'm able to connect a little bit more with the younger generations that's coming in, because we have about 1, 2, 3, 4 generations that are currently working into the fire service right now. And those different generations and we have the entire span here in Oregon, and that's what I love about it, because everybody brings a little bit different to the table. And so growing up on a farm, being raised a certain way, we have to also understand that just because I'm a millennial and was raised by a baby boomer, that doesn't mean that, being a millennial, that somebody else could have been raised by somebody of whatever the generation, I don't remember what it is right offhand, but whatever the generation was greater than the baby boomer, because I do think that plays a different factor in of who we are by what generation we were raised by, even more so than what generation we actually are. So I think managing the different generations is all about communication. So if we look at the older generation in our organization, sometimes, I eat lunch at the kitchen table with them a lot. And that's where I can better connect with the older generation. They like to see like face to face, have a conversation, that sort of thing. They're not going to be the biggest on the emails or the app on your phone or, I mean, heck, I don't even know. Maybe one of them still has a flip phone. So, that just may not be the way that to communicate with them. So I think that starts there, understanding that there's going to be different levels of communication and how, because then on the far opposite end, this is why we're doing a podcast, because my son is going to be a guy that listens to podcasts like those are that age group, 23, 12 to 27, those individuals, that's where it's at. So that stream of communication, I think, is the biggest. So they'll be the ones that want us to embrace new technology, want us to embrace it, send emails and use the apps on the phones and all those things. And I can appreciate that too. So we try to balance both. If I do a memo and I send a memo out on the app, I always print multiple memos out, and then that way I lay them on the kitchen table too. So I think it just starts with communication, just being able to understand how to communicate with the different generations, and maybe that they just view things a little bit different. So that's just my take on it. Not sure if it's the one all be all, but I think that the most organizations break down because of the lack of communication.
I think just anything in communication. I mean, marriages break down because of communication, relationships, businesses, everything. Communication, people will say, oh, it's a soft skill. Well, the reason it's called soft is because you can't put hard data and measure it when it's actually one of the most important things. So people should stop kind of trashing the soft skills and maybe start using them a little more. But then when you're leading a department, there's obviously the here and now, and then there's where's the future of the department when it comes into strategic planning. Because like you're not going to be there for another 50 years probably. So what kind of foundation are you trying to build right now that you're hoping the next chief can be able to continue to build upon, rather than hopefully someone doesn't come in who has an ego who just tries to tear everything down and start over again on what you've already been building?
Yeah, I know. I sure hope not either. Because I feel like we were kind of in a situation in Napoleon when I first took over in Napoleon. That was back in 2015. And we were in a place where I went from union president at the time, and I went to fire chief. And I knew exactly what our issues were there, right? I knew that we had issues with morale, trust, communication, training, all these sorts of things. So we created an internal strategic plan where, we just worked within the organization to kind of identify fix inside the house. That same model is what we began in Oregon too. So in this foundation, this is where it starts, is that, is an internal strategic plan where we identified more than 12 objectives. We worked on different things, besides the ones I just named. We also worked in Oregon on workload balance, because there was a lot of different priorities at the time that I arrived here that were the priorities, priorities more than training and things of that nature, where I didn't want firefighters having different priorities than what directly affected their response and the ability to perform their job. So we redirected all those. But also during the first 90 days when I was in Oregon, I called it the listening tour. And what happened is opened up the door, did a one-on-one with all the firefighters, have them schedule a meeting. And then it was just, get to know you get to know me. What do you love about Oregon Fire Department? What don't you love about Oregon Fire Department? And, took all that information in, and then created a PowerPoint, had a town hall meeting, and then just started communicating this out, communicating what the plan involved and what we were going to start working on, how we were going to start embracing and empowering our people to be a part of the solution, creating committees. And so we have the hiring committee, or we have the engine committee, or we have the grant committee. And these individuals, let them blossom and go to work and use their skills to best perform for the organization, where they have a say in it. So that's where this kind of started. We embraced a few other things. 100-0. 100-0 is something that I live by. It's something we established in Napoleon, something I established in Oregon, and that is 100% accountable for your actions with zero excuses. hey, we're all going to make mistakes, but let's just move on. Let's learn from them and let's move on. And I think that, as chief, I try to look at it as a fact that we can be more educational in these pieces. Dealt with this a lot here in Oregon, that is since coming here to this position right into the fire chief, not growing up in the Oregon Fire Department, never working in the Oregon Fire Department, it was really of a challenge, because not only do I have to learn the people, I have something to prove. I have something to prove to them that I can be a good chief for you. And there's a mutual respect that has to go back and forth. So you got to get small wins at city council. You got to get small wins of where they're wanting to see their organization go. That's that part of me working on the organization. You guys continue to do a good job, get out the door and get those little wins for the community and for our service and our department. And I'll continue to work hard on the organization so we can, advance us forward. So that's one part of the strategic plan, what I would say the internal strategic plan that I titled the Roadmap to Success. We've almost completed every single one of those objectives in that plan thus far. And then next step would be the community-driven strategic plan. The community-driven strategic plan, we put out and had about 22 stakeholders, and we hosted a stakeholder meeting. This is where we could educate our community about what our department, does, how it operates, so on and so forth. We worked together on a SWOT analysis and, what our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats were. And we came up with a nice community-driven strategic plan to make sure that what we were working towards or what we felt we needed to work towards aligned with the community. Because if it doesn't align, then you don't get the support. So by having those stakeholders give us the feedback, we then took all that information in and we created a plan that says that we have goals and objectives to increase our staffing, improve our response times, be better marketers, and provide better education. These are 4 major bullet points that are goals within this strategic plan. And so now that begins the execution. We have the safety meetings and we start talking about those. But the cool part about doing the strategic plans, everybody's bought into it. So it's all communication. It's all communication based. Everybody has a little piece into this. And that includes our members of our department, but also the stakeholders out in the community. So we have our large hospitals and our large industry, but our small businesses and our, normal citizens that all had a piece in helping us give the information for this strategic plan. We realized during that time that our staffing woes were something that did align with the community, and that's what we're working on now. But we also are realizing too that there's a couple other major pieces that the community wanted to see from us, and that was from a marketing standpoint. Like, tell your story. We don't know, sometimes they feel because they don't hear sirens or we have a code 2 response all the time when they're going to the call. They don't know that, we don't just sleep till we're hungry and then eat till we're tired again, that we're running 3,500 calls a day and 30% of those are overlapping runs. So those are the types of information that we have to do better about telling our story. So we have been working on that as well. And actually just tonight, it's kind of crazy, just in about at 7:05, I think is when it's scheduled to launch on Facebook from our page that we revamped our entire website to really try to help communicate to our community. And our goal in our mind, and what I told Tyler Wepler, who is our fire inspector, that also is our public educator. He is awesome when it comes to this website and stuff. I told him, I said, our goal should be to not hear the phone ring, because again, understanding our generations today, technology, the access to computer, being on your phone all the time. If we can answer the question that they may have about our organization or whatever, and by just being on our website, then that's a win right there. Or if they want to reach out to us to get education, they should be able to fill out a form, and things of that nature. So, those types of things really helped us open up our eyes to make sure that we're aligning with the community. And so that's a 5-year plan that we're working on. I think strategic planning is a huge portion in the success of a fire department. It's a success in any organization, because quite honestly, during that strategic plan, we created our mission statement as a group. We created our vision statement as a group, and all of our core values. And so everybody knows, what is our mission and what is our vision and what are our core values, and that what we're all working towards. And then it's just constantly, revisiting it all the time. And then every time that we go to sell that what we're going to do or change or want to do, we can then look back and say, this is how it feeds to what we've planned for. And I think that goes a long way with city administration and city leadership to understand that this is just not a knee-jerk reaction. This is a planned event. It may be 3 years from now before it happens, but we anticipated this. We looked forward to this. This is just where we're now getting to it in our part. So.
Mm-hmm. And like when you're looking at the succession of the department, obviously there's hiring involved and there's promoting. When it comes to promoting someone to like a higher rank, maybe like a deputy chief, assistant chief, battalion chief, how do you go about deciding whether you want to hire internally or pull in an external candidate?
So it's all about I would say the phase, where you're at with your organization at the time. So like in our organization right now is we do got it's a mixed group organization. We got a lot of younger individuals. And so I would say it depends on where you're at with your organization. It also depends on what your finger on the pulse is of your culture. Do you need a little bit of a change? And if you need a little bit of a change of a culture, it's not the worst thing to have somebody from the outside with new, fresh eyes to come in and look at the place. Essentially that's what happened with me here. I mean, I'm the very first city fire chief for Oregon that's never worked at Oregon Fire Department. I think they recognize the fact that they just needed some change, and that sometimes it's just all of our organizations sometimes just need that, because it just gets so ingrained into what culture it is, and the only way it's going to be is if you have some fresh eyes sometimes. So I would say it depends, because we built something in Napoleon over the course of the 7 years, and when I left there, I was a firm believer that yes, it should stay internally. We had worked hard to build up those individuals within that place, and that's no different than what we're doing now today. It's investing into our people, trying to educate them, provide the resources to them so they can be the ones, that are taking my seat. I want them to be there. And that's where I felt very happy about that, being able to comfortably leave Napoleon, knowing that they were going to be in good hands with Chief Dave Bowen. He was just going to be able to continue on the path what it is. He was a phenomenal lieutenant, but then also a phenomenal captain as well. And so great leader, and just going to be able to, continue that path as it continues to go. So, and that's what I'm striving to do here. It's rewarding to know that you've created people to be able to take your spot. That's what the whole plan, that's the whole goal, right?
And I think that speaks volumes to a leader when you can step away and everything runs as it should. Your goal is to be able to make the machine, the department, be able to function on its own. Now, this is something that you're in control of. And I know one of the things I want to talk about with you is kind of navigating the political landscape, because as fire chief of a municipality, you're working with police chief, you're working with human resources, risk, city manager, to be able to get initiatives done. It's not just Chief Brian wants this, he gets it. You have to be able to get everybody else on your team. So municipalities, they're political in nature, and let's be honest, what isn't really political nowadays? So how do you kind of go about navigating the political landscape at your department to kind of strive for the most favorable outcomes you want for your department and team?
It's it's a challenge, Alec. It really is, because here's the thing. It's all about creating relationships. And so I would say in the organization, here's a way of that I've looked at this a little bit, is that as you create relationships at the fire department, when I first became fire chief in Napoleon, I went from firefighter to fire chief. And I said there was never, I honestly didn't even comprehend the fact that I had changed my name to Chief O'Brien at that time, until my son, being cocky kid that he is, in the kitchen says, "Oh, okay, Chief O'Brien," And so I'm like, that kind of stepped me back, and I'm like, what? Like, so I never even really realized, I've never even really cared that's even a thing. But with that being said, in the firehouse, I was I was always Clayton because I was the firefighter paramedic that went from firefighter to fire chief. I knew that I had something to prove to all of my now subordinates, but were once my coworkers, and I still look at them as coworkers too. And so I never looked at them as like subordinates and things of that nature. I wasn't going to ever tell anybody that they had to call me Chief O'Brien. And for the period of time, I would say about 3 months, 3 to 6 months, these relationships were, hey, Clayton, all the time in the firehouse. And then they slowly began to churn Chief O'Brien in the firehouse. And as they turned, I realized that I was gaining their respect. And that's all that meant. I was gaining their respect by having these little wins. And it became because of the little wins in the political landscape. And because we're having little wins at city council with city administration. We're doing things. We're getting these little things done. It was the exact opposite in the public eye. What I was trying to do in the public was to get them to call me Clayton, because automatically I'm Chief O'Brien, So when I become part of Rotary and I sit on the LEPC board, or I'm at the EMA and I'm at the health department and all these different advisory ones, and you're just automatically Chief O'Brien. The moment that I get them in the public to start calling me Clayton is when I realize that now we've created a friendship. It's not about, now I'm not always just there with my hand out asking you for something, you know me at this level. Like we talk golf, we talk about our families and things. And I think that that's where there is a human and there's a person behind this badge, and I'm willing to, and I want to be very transparent. I want everybody to know that I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, and that we all do. And so by creating these relationships, then begins you to then be able to really get some work done where you can have some candid conversations. They understand your intent, and then it's building that trust. And so what's very unique is that the difference between, say, like Napoleon and Oregon was that in Napoleon, I had worked since 2009 there. So I was a firefighter paramedic on the line. I ran the public education division. So I had already had a lot of community contacts, knew a lot of people. And then, so when I became chief, I still just kind of embraced these, but became part of different, now, became a Rotarian and things of that nature, and got with the business owners. Now coming to Oregon, I didn't have this whole expanded, series of, being together and learning a bunch of people and the who's the main players in the town type of thing. Over a year and a half, that's where I have been trying to now create these relationships within my own community through communication, starting stakeholders, or I became part of the Eastern Maumee Bay Chamber, gets you connected to the business owners. We do the fire department does a retirees lunch every month, and so there's a lot of firefighters meet at the local restaurant, do a lunch. So being a part of those things, trying to get out in the community as much as I can. It's just we're in a part right now currently in our department that we're working heavily internally to make sure that everything's corrected inside our walls as we bring new hires in. We've began to get some of those little wins, right? And that's what started right away when we got here. So we started getting those little wins with the city leadership and city council. And I think it comes by showing that we're taking everything into consideration. When we do an internal strategic plan and when we do a community-driven strategic plan, we're not just saying because Chief O'Brien said so. It's being the mindset of data driven. This is just what the data says. Like it's me communicating the data to you in a way that you can understand it. And with that being said is showing that right now we're in the phase, we applied for the SAFER grant for 12 additional full-time firefighters here. That is going to help us staff a second station if we're successful, and be able to meet now the NFPA 1710 compliance. City Council has received this information, and then they've already taken the first step to say, hey, let's work towards maybe trying to get like a first step. How do we get 3 individuals maybe right now? and then a planned approach. And that was all because of the strategic plan that really kind of helped communicate this, that I said, the decisions we're making today don't necessarily affect tomorrow. They affect 2029 and 2030. These are what we're building for. You know, I'm showing an apparatus replacement and equipment plan out to 2050 that we built, you know, and this is because we don't buy, you know, we don't buy $20,000 trucks. We buy $2 million trucks. And so those things have to be planned. And the more that I've learned and I learned this very quickly when I became a new chief, is because as a firefighter paramedic, you live in that 24-hour shift. Everything you do in that 24 hours is done. I go on the call, I come back, I do the report, and it's done. I don't really, if anything, I work on a couple small projects that may last me a couple shifts, right? Then I go up to a company officer level, and then now I'm working in that 24-hour shift up to maybe about 30 days. You know, I'm working on these a little bit more extended projects. You graduate up, and as you continue to go up the ranks, you got to continue to look out farther and farther, and that you're working on, you know, major plans that are constantly working towards something. I mean, I think that we worked on a few different things that we completed that took more than 3 years in Napoleon to get completed. It's about follow through, staying consistent with things, and that I think is a big factor in how you can begin to drop little nuggets along the way. Because what I learned right then and there as a new chief was that in the political landscape and in the politics, decisions don't happen. In government in general, things don't happen as quickly as what we think they're going to happen. You know, we solve an emergency right now today, that is done. But when, as chief, as you continue to move up, nobody really trains you to understand that put on the brakes, because you better be ready to just drop a nugget, talk about it, but don't expect an answer right there. Maybe revisit it. Maybe, you know, talk about it in a week or so. But that's what I've learned early on as a chief, and I continue to do that today, that if I know that something's kind of coming down the pike, that we've had conversations in here, I might just kind of loft it out there. And because as much as we don't want to hear it, sometimes it's got to be their idea. And that's okay. And I'm completely okay with it being somebody else's idea, because at the end of the day, there's 100 ways to skin a cat, but we just got to have that cat skinned. And so if it becomes their idea and they can embrace it and empower it, then we can go with it, you know? And so by dropping nuggets, they're going to think about it. If you've created a relationship enough where they're going to be able to, you know, listen to you and things of that nature. That's the way that I approach it. I approach it just by meeting them at their place too. You know, if that means that you go to the coffee shop and have coffee with them, if that means that, you know, you meet them at their place, and it's not always a structured meeting at the fire station. You know, that's why you join these other organizations, or you go out to lunch and you meet them there, and show that, you know, you are a human. You are, you know, you're Clayton. You're somebody behind there's an actual person behind the badge you can talk to. So.
I know it's kind of crazy, right? Like police officers and firefighters, you're all actually real people with lives outside of public safety. Oh man, I don't understand why people don't get that.
It's hard because I think it's maybe sometimes like, I don't know if it's just maybe intimidating or what the professional, you know, kind of thing because of what the badge does. I wear two types of uniforms. You see the one that I have here. I thought about wearing the other one that I wear today, but it was at the dry cleaner, so I didn't have it. But it's just like our logo here, and then it has my name there. You know, it has the embroidery here. It's just not all the hard metal. A little softer approach, right? And then I think about this stuff a lot, because I think it's those types of things that kind of break down some barriers. You know, when I'm in a polo shirt, it breaks down some barriers. It just is a little bit more relaxed. And I think the same hold true for the organization as a whole. You know, like I remember when I was on the line, it was so strict about, you got to be in that button up shirt, you know, at 3:00 in the morning when you're going on the EMS call. I'm not a big stickler about that. I get professionalism, and I totally embrace that. But I also get comfortability in doing your job, and our people do a lot of maintenance on things out in the bays, and, you know, working on a regular basis, and We just destroyed so many of those shirts. I did a lot of maintenance when I was on the line, so I can appreciate that. When I was just you're constantly jumping back and forth, and it's things like that that I think help morale too. When they get to wear a T-shirt, because if you do a good job when you go out there, at the end of the day, 90% of the time they're not going to remember what you were even wearing.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. And like one of the topics you kept referring to is learning. And one question I'd like to ask you is, if you were to go back to the beginning of your career as a firefighter, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self that you know now that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your career?
Well, some of the advice I would give myself is, I would say slow down. And the reason why I would say slow down is because, as I shared with you a little bit earlier, Alec, was that, I was very young when I had a family, when I started my family, got married when I was 20 years old. And as you could imagine, I was raised on a farm, and I was raised that when my dad passed away, I was the only boy. So we had 5 sisters. I have 5 sisters now. At the time, I had 3 sisters. And this is a time that, we heated our house with wood. So if we didn't have the wood chopped and we didn't have it stacked and I didn't have a fire going, we weren't having, heat in the house type of thing. So I would say, like, if I was to able to go back, I think it would be just to slow down, because I had worked so much at the in the early stages of my career. I worked 2 full-time jobs. I worked 48-hour shifts for 5 years. And so for majority of the time, my kids growing up, they knew that dad was working. And then, 24-hour shifts are just, those are a long stint. I was fortunate enough to have one of those 24s within my hometown where they could come up to the station and, we could have Nerf gun wars in the station with the kids and things, because I had a great partner and things. But it's still a lot of time away, a lot of missed games and things like that. It's easy to say now, but at the time when you're in it, like, it was something that had to be. It's what I tell my son now. You got to grind, man. You just got to grind. You got to grind it out. And you got to, if you're ever going to get ahead, that's what you got to do. I would say at times there would be to, just kind of slow down, because there was a lot of sacrifices that are there now. I'm glad that I was able to, I was promoted to fire chief when my son became a freshman in high school. And that couldn't have been more perfect timing, because he was a basketball player. And from that day forward, I said I wasn't going to miss one game. And I traveled wherever it was going to be. And I actually only missed one game because I was sick, and I didn't want to get anybody else sick of the game. And my wife made me stay home. So, but otherwise I would have went. And so from that day, because the chief job allowed the flexibility of being able to, go to have that Monday through Friday kind of job. Yes, there's extended hours here and there, but you're all over the place. And it allowed that ability for me to make sure that I was present during those main crucial years, because those were my crucial years too. And unfortunately, that was when my dad had passed away. And so I knew I wanted to be very present for the family. But if there was anything I could change, that would probably be one thing, would just be kind of slow down, because at that time too, you think you're invisible. Like, you can say yes to everything. So when I told you about the podcast thing, before, when in my younger days, boom, yep, no problem, we're going to do it. And then I'm just going to, I'm going to do whatever it takes to just make sure it's done. And then now I'm kind of like, I got to pick and choose, because I realize, like, as we talked about reputation, and we talked about, we don't want our name on something that we can't fully invest into. That's helped me slow down and just kind of think about it a little bit more.
I mean, I appreciate, selfishly, I kind of ask these questions because I love to hear the best from the people who are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years older than me, because I'm at the stage where you guys all are. So, we're completely different phases of life. I don't have a family. I'm not in a relationship. I'm a single guy. I'm the age of your son. So, I appreciate what you're sharing here. And even getting things more granular, I always like to ask this question at the end, that in one sentence that's less than 9 words, what message do you want listeners to take away from our exchange today? I am a huge believer that simplicity is one of the best things. It brings out the most knowledge and wise. So I was kind of interested to hear what your 9 words would be.
I could probably do it in less than 9 words.
Please do.
And it's simple as this to all firefighters, and that is prepare for your tomorrow. And if you just really think about that, prepare for your tomorrow, and I know that tomorrow's never guaranteed, but you got to prepare that it's going to be there. The only way you can always ensure that tomorrow's going to be is because yesterday you prepared for today. And so if you think about it in that way all the time, that I'm just trying to stay ahead and how am I preparing myself to be better? And so I would say in less than 9 words, just prepare for your tomorrow.
I love that. My college coach in soccer would say the 3 Ps of plan, prepare, perform. If you don't have a plan, you're having a plan to fail. So I think that is great advice that you can take, whether it's in the fire service or any walk of life. Thank you very much for appearing on here today, Chief O'Brien. It was a pleasure having you on. I'm sure the audience is going to benefit a lot from our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alec. I really appreciate it. It was just an honor to be a part of the Chief Exchange podcast. I know that we were able to connect on LinkedIn, a while ago, and then had a conversation on the phone. And for a young guy like yourself, man, you're doing it. So be proud of yourself. I know I'm certainly proud of you because at your age, it's always nice to see the success of younger ones coming in and just getting after it. So. Good for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P Podcast, Premier, Professional, and Proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel.